Hello, everyone.
Hi. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Hen House at Home Fall Book Tour. We are so excited to bring these events to you today and every Tuesday for the next 2 months till the end of October. And we are so excited to, first of all, actually, let's celebrate a pup date. Today was a pup date. We're so excited to welcome to the world Animal Wife by Laura Ehrlich, which is right there. A story collection that won the Red Hen Press Fiction Award. So it's available now everywhere books are sold, so go and get your copy. So tonight we are super happy to welcome a special Quill panel. So this is going to feature 3 Quill winners and our current Quill judge, as well as Tobi Harper, the founder of Quill, who's right next to me. So Tobi, what can you say about what's coming up tonight?
Well, virtual world, very excited to be able to do this with people from all over the country. I think we're in like 2 or 3 different time zones now. So again, we're going to get to hear from our last 3 award winners for Quill and our current Quill judge. So altogether, we're going to be hearing from Chelsea Catherine, David Brendan Hopes, Carlos Allende, and Amber Flynn. Very excited to hear all of them. And first up, we're going to hear Chelsea Catherine read from the brand new Summer of the Cicadas. Very excited to hear about it. And here she comes.
Hey everyone, I'm Chelsea, and I'm going to read from pretty much the very end of the book. So the main character, Jess, is at a luncheon. She's been honored for her work in the community, and she shows up at this luncheon and finds the woman that she's had a crush on. I'm itching for a second glass of champagne when a voice comes from behind me. Well, look at you, rock star. I crane my neck, turn. Natasha stands there, Mark at her side. She's in a white dress too, but something more formal than Maggie. It tapers around her stomach, the fabric thick and smooth along her skin. Her hair curls tightly. She wears eyeliner. She never wears eyeliner. And then I spot the emerald and diamond encrusted rock on her ring finger. My heart drops. A feeling floods through me, so strong I think I'm going to pass out. I put my hand on the table. Pain racks my body. I force myself to smile. Hey there. I'm so glad you're here, Natasha says. I thought you might not show up. Shaking, I rise. It feels like someone has just shot me in the gut. Mason made me. I hold out my hand. How are you, Mark? There's a second where he pauses, staring at me, and I stare back, my hand extended. Then he reaches out and clasps my hand. I squeeze back as hard as I can. It feels like my eyes are watering when I pull away. Things are good, he says. How are they with you? I nod to Natasha's ring. Not as good as they are with you, apparently. Mark laughs. Happened a week ago. I'm a lucky guy. Heat branches across my chest, no match for the air conditioning ruffling the lip of my blouse. I'm about to congratulate them when Maggie shows up with 2 more mimosas in her hand. She gives me one, then turns to Mark and Natasha. Hi. She holds out her hand. I'm Maggie. She and Mark start talking about copy editing and working for local presses. I hold the drink to my chest. My eyes stay on Natasha. After a while, she turns and locks eyes with me. Her lips spread into a line, and her eyes are glossy, probably from a mimosa or 2. I wonder if her love for Mark is real, or if she's doing this because that's what she thinks she's supposed to do. Because she's Natasha, and she has this stubborn, committed outlook on what her life is going to be like. A picture in her head of the way things were destined to happen. I turn away from her just as the first speaker steps up to the microphone and asks everyone to take their seats. Maggie sits down, and I take my place next to her. Natasha sits with Mark and I at the front table of us, so I'm staring at the back of her head and her arms free of fabric. I haven't seen her arms exposed in public like this since she was in college. I remember back then she was a bit pudgier, more childlike. Now she's full-on woman, this astute, snarky thing that no one dares to argue with. I stare at her curls, her back. She shifts, and then for a moment it feels like the whole world slows down. She turns around. Everyone else is still, staring face forward at the speaker. Natasha and I lock gazes. A moment passes. I want to tell her it's okay, that she can go. I'm not the same girl who cried every night over Lena. I'm not the girl who couldn't face a morning without a glass of whiskey. Natasha holds my gaze for another moment, then she tucks a curl of her hair behind her ear and turns away. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chelsea. Always love hearing from this one. All right, and next up, we're going to hear from Carlos Allende, who actually just won the award. The book isn't even out yet, but he's going to go ahead and give us a snapshot of it. All right, Carlos, take it away.
Hi. Well, thank you for having me here. So this is from my book, Coffee Shopping Motor Love. This is from around the middle, and the character on this is a 37-year-old white guy from Kentucky. The accent is very important, but I cannot do a proper Southern accent, so I'm just going to try my best. Okay, 1, 2, 3. I'm sitting on the living room couch with my legs crossed. If I smoked, now would be the moment to light up a Virginia Slim, take a deep drag, and then exhale with a whimper. It's been 2 months since Jignesh moved in. I would be lying if I said I wasn't curious about his reasons to buy the freezer first, then keep it in my garage all this time and forbid me to ever set foot inside. But with them taking care of a few outstanding bills, sending Murad to repaint the kitchen, and of course paying his rent on time, I completely forgot about it. I mentioned it once to my friend Lucille. She told me to be careful. He could have a dead body inside, I replied, then took a long sip of my pumpkin latte. I don't care. I really didn't. You see, there have been many men in my life, tall, short, kind, and abusive, mostly abusive, and let's not forget about that miserable rat whose name I cannot pronounce without getting a bitter taste. But Jignesh is the first one with money. I didn't want to ruin it with stupid questions about the freezer. Was I curious? Of course I was, but so were Bluebeard's wives, and I am no Jean Parker. Therefore, I decided not to give it another thought. Why, with Jignesh and I doing so well as a couple, we still have separate rooms. He said he didn't want to rush things, and I respected his decision. Yet, every once in a while, with him feeling lonely and me always horny, we've been sharing more than the couch for watching TV. But then I returned home this evening after having spent Thanksgiving at Lucille and Marcos, carrying more turkey leftovers than I could fit inside the refrigerator. I guess I'll have to put the rest inside Jignesh's freezer, I sang to myself in my best interpretation of Marcia Cross from Desperate Housewives, then sashayed my way to the garage. I was in such an excellent mood. We had spent the whole afternoon listening to Wilson Phillips. Jignesh hadn't returned from his parents yet. Therefore, I couldn't ask for his permission to unlock the freezer. I didn't need a key anyhow, just a screwdriver to remove the latch. I felt so manly sitting up a ladder against the wall to reach the top shelf, taking down the toolbox, selecting the right screwdriver. Did I need a Phillips head or a flat one? I had to go down and check twice. If my father could see me now, I remember I thought, he'd be so proud, I laughed. He would think I mended my ways and stopped using cosmetics. I'm certainly glad my father wasn't there to see me, though, because it wasn't frozen Alaskan crab what I found inside that darn freezer. Well, I'll be damned, I thought for a brief second. This isn't Alaskan crab. This is a human body. Then I screamed louder than Nicole Kidman in, well, any of her movies. I shot the lead and, following my first instinct, ran to the middle of the street where I tried to scream again. Out came only a muffled bellowing. I stayed there, gasping and mewling in pain for a few minutes. If anyone had heard me scream before, no one came to my rescue. Eventually, I reckoned I wasn't in any immediate danger. Jignesh wouldn't be back till late. His mother is not like Lucille, who starts packing up leftovers the moment she puts the pie on the table. I went back inside and searched for my phone, planning to call the police. I couldn't find it. Then I remembered that I had connected it to Lucille's stereo, so we could listen to music on Spotify, and realized that I probably left it there. I sat down on the couch and cried. Oh boy, did I cry, louder and more crestfallen than a Mexican soap opera actress who suddenly discovers that the man for whom she left everything behind, including her father's fortune, is a cold-blooded murderer. I know, calling Jignesh my man is rather a stretch. The French would refer to our relationship as plan cul, which is but an elegant way to say that we have no real attachments. Still, I felt shattered. Again, it is not that I didn't have my suspicions. Jignesh can be rough sometimes. He's arrogant and unkind and envious of other people. Then again, most men I talk to end up being rough, arrogant, and unkind too. I assumed that Jignesh was but an ordinary man with ordinary man urges. Forcing me to stay in my place felt like his manly prerogative. I was about to go and call the police from the neighbors, but then I looked at the Men of Cold calendar on the wall, and it reminded me that today is only November the 22nd. Jignesh never pays his share of the rent before the 30th, and the mortgage is not due until the 4th. What should I do? I asked, looking intensely at Gage Weston's ballsack. That's it. Thank you.
Carlos, that was hilarious. Thank you. Thank you so much. My gosh, this. Okay, so right. Coffee Shopping Murder Love coming out in 2022. Very much looking forward to it. All right. So next up, I'll be bringing up David Brendan Hopes, who wrote this book, The Falls of the Wyona. It's the award-winning Quill book just before Summer of the Cicadas. David, looking forward to hearing you. Take it away.
The main characters here are a gang of boys during World War II who do the ordinary boy stuff until they find out that two of their company are in love. And they sort of find it out this way. For a couple of years, we tested one another's mettle by doing a polar bear camp along the Wyona just above the falls, where the slopes faced north and we imagined it would be colder and rougher. We slept all jumbled in a heap, like puppies in a box. We prided ourselves on traveling light, but Glenn had a Boy Scout pack that his mother had sewn patches on, and he would not hike without it, being that a Boy Scout needs to be prepared and all that. There was no scout troop within 30 miles, so Glenn had to carry on the tradition all by his lonesome, a lone wolf, a pursuit which made him even more conspicuous than usual. He'd have to wear his uniform when he was doing scout stuff, and if that didn't make him a target, nothing would. But in that pack, he managed to carry the things we found uses for, but were too proud to carry ourselves. Matches, or extra socks, or a Three Musketeers bar, or what have you. We rolled our eyes when we saw it on him, but praised him silently when it saved our butts. On one of those nights, an unusually bitter Thanksgiving weekend, I saw something I had no experience then to understand. I was spooning Tilden, his tough little body curled against mine, facing the dim, red, still flickering campfire. I'd hoped to wake him so we could trade places. My back was freezing against the river with its winds and sprays. But when I sat up, not all the way, but just a little, I saw that Vince and Glenn were not spooning. They lay face to face, They were kissing like people in the movies, gentle and hungry at once, passionate, transfigured, no longer boys. Vince moaned a little, like Glenn was hurting him, but I didn't think he was. I didn't know what I felt right then, but when I analyzed later, I knew I felt left out. Vince and Glenn had forged ahead, but I was where I was not ready to go. With me, it would be a girl, but I didn't suppose the bases were much that different. I wondered when I would want somebody so much I'd grown on a frozen hillside. I could tell by the movement he made that Tilden was awake too and watching. I heard Tilden whisper, "Are we supposed to do that?" I waited before I answered. I really didn't know, so I said, "I don't know. You want to?" Tilden waited a very long time. Finally, he said, "Nah." He snuggled back against me where it was all warm and comfy for him. Changing places would cause too much upheaval now, so I just settled into it and tried to get back to sleep. Thanks.
Thank you, David. That's one of my favorite excerpts. I like the idea of seeing your fellow friends making out in a sleeping bag and trying to figure out if you should start too.
Are we meant to do that?
Well, I don't know. I had a different experience. I played a lot of softball. So thank you so much, David. Of course, so good to hear from you. Next up, we're going to be welcoming actually this year's Quill judge and a forthcoming Red Hen author and poet, Amber Flame. Amber, let's see. Amber Flame. I think you might be.
There I am. Hi,
brilliant.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so good to have you. So looking forward to hearing you. Yeah, really.
I think about your softball comments.
All righty, talk to you just after this.
All right, y'all. I'm a poet for Red Hen, as Toby said, and I'm going to be reading a couple of poems from my forthcoming book, which is called Apocrypha. And just for a little bit of context, it is a non-gendered love story told through poetry between a beloved and their lover. And it is inspired by the book of Song of Solomon in the Bible, which as a church kid was my primary source of love and erotica context. So it's also propelled by these words that are not in English. I kept running into lists of words that were for love and romance and sex and all of these delicious things, but they don't directly translate to English. And so I took them and studied them and poetically redefined them. So I'm going to introduce you to the two characters and then read about their first meeting. Tosca, Russian, noun. 1. The anguish of both melancholy and ennui. 2. A great hunger with no satisfaction. I, always distant star, measureless sea, untilled field. Discover my wandering has left me an arid heart, salted throat. Voorpret, Dutch, noun. 1. Physical excitement in anticipation of fun or pleasure. 2. The first sweet awareness. Once sure of everything, a youngling, a ripe plucking, eaten before fruit rotted, letting juice wander of its own will. When my ache finds me, I am perpetually sticky, drawing bees. Sure, I know the cycle of droop, of all things fertile. Sure, consumption is the way to reap a harvest. And the final piece I'm going to read for you, Yuan Fen, Chinese verb. 1, to meet because of fate. 2, to be inexorably drawn into an interaction with no destined outcome. The puncture, hip and rib, threatens skin. Your smells on my tongue lay thick in weight. Animal me can taste you coming, how bone popped, crackling staccato, jaw and slow stretch, teeth unsheathing. Animal me can taste the puncture, you coming, how hip and rib, bone popped, threaten, crackling staccato skin. Jaw and slow stretch, teeth unsheathing. Your smells on my tongue lay thick in weight. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So looking forward to your next collection. And now we're going to bring the whole queer Quill family up here. Hello. Well, not all of us. There are two more of us. You can only fit so many on one big screen. All right, let's see. We want to tighten this. What do you think? Is that too tight? Actually, it feels kind of
nice and cozy.
I have not yet moderated while running a show, but so far so good. So I just have some questions and things to sort of like get us, I don't know, get some conversation flowing. One of the things I like to ask people in general is how, and this is totally, if you don't want to answer, you can just skip along. But how do you see yourself as directly participating or not in queer literature?
Well, David, you were ready to answer.
No, I was just taking a deep breath, hoping that Carlos would come in first.
I'm gay, but this is my first novel in which my main characters are conspicuously gay, and I gotta say that my target audience are not just gays. It's everybody, and so what I see what I look with my novel is to help non-gay people understand what gay people go through. And it is a comedy, it is a thriller as well, and it's very gay, but it's not just for gay people. And I hope that the power of storytelling is that it allows you to get into the shoes of another person, and you can understand what person is feeling. And when you can understand what that person is feeling, you develop an effective connection with those characters, and from there to developing effective connections to people that are just like that, it's a small step. So when we represent gay people or people of color or women or handicapped people or whomever is underrepresented in fiction, and we can develop a parasocial relationship with them, then we want to develop the same kind of relationships in real life. So I see myself a little bit like an engineer that is laying out a bridge between communities. So this is a kind of crazy things we think about, and these are our fears and these are our hopes, and this is how weird we are. You want to be friends, and that's my hope. That's my hope that non-gay people that don't have gay people in their lives will want to become friends with gay people, well, queer people, to be more inclusive.
Yeah, totally. Very cool. Well, that was a really good answer. Does anyone else?
I think that there's some really, I think of when I thought of this question, when I saw this question, I thought, I think my biggest contribution is actually as a consumer, making queer literature so every day and everywhere that it doesn't have to be defined that way. It's so amazing when you're just reading for enjoyment. I read so much, and I read just for enjoyment. And so that idea of like, it's just there. It's there among the options of things to read because it is normative at that point. Like to make it so normative that it's yeah, of course I have. I mean, it turns out a majority of them. That's just because they write what I enjoy, and I think they write what I enjoy because I can see myself in it. And I would say queer literature is the most inclusive because every author comes to it knowing that they didn't see themselves in something before, and now they can.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, frankly, that was why I started Quill. Actually, I read Stone Butch Blues in grad school. I didn't even take the class. I ended up not taking the class, but my partner at the time was like, no, but you still have to read this book.
Yeah.
I read it, and I found myself for the first time. Like, I'd read plenty of queer books, but you find yourself, you find your own specific self,
Mhm.
and it changes your life. It absolutely changed my life, and there could use to be a lot more of that, I think.
Oh, remember when it was like The Well of Loneliness, Stonebridge
Yeah.
Blues, and Zammy? Those are pretty much your like three broadest options. And I remember reading them in that order, and coming on Zammy and being like, oh my gosh, what else? What else is there? And so much of what she writes is not specifically about being a lesbian, about being queer, just to sink into Audre Lorde as Audre Lorde, the author I enjoy. That's what always ends up happening, right? So yeah, Stonebridge Blues is revolutionary, and it shouldn't be the only reference point we have.
My God, seriously. Yeah, absolutely. Does anyone else have any ways that you feel like you specifically do or don't participate in queer literature? I'm putting it in quotes.
I'm sort of the Methuselah of the group, I think. And one of the things I remember is when you could not mention that you were going in pursuit of gay literature. You would look around corners and maybe sneak something off the shelf. It was not mentioned in public. Oddly enough, what I'm looking forward to is the same situation with a totally different interpretation. I want gay literature, queer literature to be so acceptable, so everyday, so part of the fabric of everyday existence that people don't notice whether the book is queer or not. I hope that my characters, well, for instance, the speaker in my novel is not interested in whether his friend is gay or not. It's just, other people are, but Alden is advanced in that it doesn't make much of a ripple in his life. And that's what I want my readers to be. Find some way to train my readers to be like Alden and just say, well, there, two boys are fucking. Let's just look the other way and not care. I wish I hadn't said
that. Chelsea, not to put you on the spot, but I feel like I'll just prompt by saying one of the things there are many things, of course, I love about this book. But one of the things I liked about it is that the plot of the story does not revolve around her being queer. I feel like you could have put someone else in there, and it could have been the same story, but essentially like her life and the plot of her life, besides obviously this one specific queer relationship, doesn't like, she just is queer. It's not like that's the point of the story.
Yeah, I think we definitely have a lot now of examples of coming out stories in the media, like in television, movies, and I think that's a great thing. But I think people also think that like you come out of the closet and then you're done. Like that's it, boom, done. And I think a lot of the stories that I'm reading now from queer writers is like, everyday life, being queer. And I think we need more of those. I love the coming out stories. But I think to build that bridge, like Carlos was saying, a lot of the stories, it's nice to just see people living their lives and going through kind of similar or different things from the non-gays. So
yeah, totally. The non-gays.
Yeah,
absolutely. Speaking of the non-gays, in what ways do you feel marginalized? Like there's sort of like a double, right? There's like ways in which like queer literature is marginalized, but then there's other ways in which, because it's queer, it gets highlighted. So how do you feel yourself on that, I don't know, balance, I suppose, between marginalization and highlighting, I suppose?
Wow. I don't know that I feel marginalized, but I'm going to contemplate that more. It's so difficult to know your own audience, isn't it? I don't know why people pick up a book or why they don't. I'll talk to some of my friends who have not read my book, and I'll wonder why. And I'm thinking, is it because it's queer? Is it because it's Southern? There's all sorts of reasons why. So the question you ask is the perplexity. It's like I don't know the answer to that, and it perplexes me. I don't know whether being on the GLBTQ shelf is a good thing or a bad thing.
Yeah, I've heard some bookstores have started addressing this issue by putting them actually in both. Like most bookstores, when they order a book, typically strangely order 2 copies. And I've heard of some, like that's just the typical order. 2 copies is a minimum. And I've heard that sometimes they'll put one in the mainstream shelf and one in the gay and lesbian. At least the ones that are really thinking about it, specifically thinking about not only sticking it into that corner that you have to go look for.
I think definitely like queer sex is really kind of put in a different place. Like my first book, I had a lot of feedback about the sex scenes and the erotica. And I honestly felt like I didn't put any more detail than, like a straight white dude would put in a story. But it got so blown out of proportion, I think, because people hadn't read it yet or because it was something they hadn't seen before. So I think when we're writing sex and erotica, I think it tends to like have more of a stigma almost. I don't know if that's just my experience with things, but I definitely noticed a big difference, and I was not expecting the feedback that I did get, because I do feel that straight white dudes write sex all the time, and it's just part of the book, and it doesn't get labeled erotica. It doesn't, get put in a different section. So yeah.
It's interesting.
I wonder if Flannelwood ever got put in erotica. There are some sex scenes in that book.
I just finished that one too.
Yeah.
I've been busy. There is some sex scenes in that.
There was some graphic sex. Sorry, Amber Flame, you're about to say.
Oh, I'd say it's interesting though how I think what I've been noticing the most is that there are more queer characters in books in general. And so then that demarcation becomes more around the author's identity than the book itself, especially when you're talking a lot of science fiction and fantasy and the stuff that's like bridging YA right now, written by a lot of Black women, actually. There's a lot of Black women who just very naturally have queer or same-sex understanding in their storytelling. And they're not listed under the LGBTQ, they're not in that corner because they are not themselves queer. So it's weird because I know there are writers who seek to be inclusive in their writing in a way that their literature, their product would be labeled queer. It's because there's so much of it and it's so naturally spoken about, but then they're not themselves queer. And so then it becomes this weird, you have this sort of oppression Olympics thing going on of like, well, are you queer enough to claim this, is your work queer? Like, is it the work that's queer or is it the person that's queer? And now it feels like the LGBTQ shelf is for queer authors and not necessarily, no matter what they're writing about. You might not have any sex scenes in it, but if it's mainly about a same-sex couple, for instance, then it's going to be considered. Or is my writing queer because no matter what I write about, if I write about being a mom, am I writing about automatically being a queer mom? Where does that line get drawn? Because now as it starts to blur inside the literature, then it comes down to how you, the author, identifies.
Yeah, absolutely. And also at the point that we're like, yeah, that is a fine line, right? Because if it's queer content, then there's a problem with own voices. Like, do hetero, right? Do the non-gays, do the non-gay authors.
Do the non-gays, right? Queer enough?
No, really, is it, I would love for there to be more inclusivity in all, in all literature, not just like, oh, you're allowed to write your own, and if you don't, like, that's bad, and you're not allowed on that shelf. It's just complicated, isn't it?
But I think that there's less complication around that than there is around, say, race. Like, if I have some student in my class who's like, I really want to include a queer character in my novel, but I'm not gay, then I wouldn't be like, well, you got to approach that with a lot of caution and do your research, like have a couple experiences or something. I don't know. It's more, but if they said, I want to put in a Black woman into my novel and I'm a white male, then it'd be like, why? Let's back up a little bit. But there's not that kind of kind of reserve, I guess, around the queer identity.
Yeah, I guess there's a little more room to maybe do it well. Like people can say, oh, they did it well or they did it not, but it's not so much of failure.
Right.
Right, as a queer. Yeah. To represent queer, I wonder. Any thoughts on that, Carlos? You look like you're thinking.
I mean, extending on what Amber said, I think that anyone should have the right to write about whoever. And I mean, in my novel, my main character is Indian American, and I know a lot of Indian Americans, but I'm not an Indian American. I did some research. I would call it the most exhaustive research. But I believe in diversity, and I believe it is important. And I wanted him to be Indian American because there are not a lot of Indian Americans in literature, and it was inspired, not based, inspired by a real person. And I think one thing that I learned from a paper that I keep citing all the time is there's a difference between a story and a narrative. A story is what you tell, and a narrative is what the reader forms in his or her head. And just by giving a character a different name, you can create a complete different narrative. And you don't need to be an expert on gay subjects to create a gay character. You can just mention nonchalantly like somebody's gay, and the reader will do the work. And yeah, it is nice if you do a lot of research, and if it's your main character or if it's an important character, yes, please do a lot of research. But if it's just somebody that happens to be gay and it's an extra character, or somebody that it's another race, is Black or Mexican, or just mention this person is this particular race, and that's it, and the reader will do the work. And I mean, that's my opinion, and that's what I try to do. For me, it's very important, diversity, and it is extremely important to celebrate how many races and how many languages we have here in Los Angeles. One time, a friend who's also a writer, he said that he's a white straight male, and he said that he was afraid of including people of color in his writing because he didn't know anything about it. And I gave him the same exact answer, like, you don't need to know much because the reader will do most of the work. Unless you're creating a main character and it's very important and you don't want to insult their culture, yes, please do a lot of research. But if it's just an extra character or I mean, the friend of a friend, yes, please give him please make the race or the gender preference or the gender conspicuous, and the reader will take care of creating everything else.
It's interesting. What do you all think about that? Does that work for you?
I love
I
it.
hadn't heard that before, and it's useful. I'm liking
yeah.
that. Mm-hmm.
I like that too. I love when it happens too. How lovely it is when you're going along in a story, and then a side character goes home and is met by a description that lets you know that they're in a same-sex relationship or something, and you're like, oh, how nice, instead of it being like, this is very gay, we're gonna be very gay, and you're like, I love that idea of like, let the narrative take care of itself. Thanks, Carlos. That's awesome.
We've all had the experience of having someone tell our story to us, having read the book. They'll say what is about it. Well, no, but yes. Thank you for creating an extra novel that I didn't really write, but still has my name on it. So I think that was a beautiful way. Didn't think of that at all, but I like it.
That's cool. Very cool. All right, this kind of leads into the next question, which I think is related in so many ways. How do your intersections of experience interact with your writing or your interactions with the literary world? Like, I realize we're talking about queerness specifically, but your other interactions of experience, of identity, how does that play into your work, with or outside of your queerness, I suppose?
So
or again, is that possible? I don't know. Maybe it's all everything.
I can begin with that. My novel, Coffee Shop in Modern Love, is a work of fiction, and it was inspired by real people and real locations. not by real events, but many characters, not all of them, but many characters were inspired by real people and by real locations. I worked in the vacation rental industry for about 10 years. And it's not a collection of different stories. It's just, they say write about what you know. And I believe in that. Yes, because it will be so much easier to create stories if you use your own experience. Then again, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't write about what you don't know. If you don't know, you should learn about it and educate yourself and research. Especially when you get a writer's block, doing research is very important because you get inspired, especially if you're writing something based on historical events. You can get a lot of inspiration from that. And so a little bit of those. Write about what you know, and if you don't know, educate yourself, do research, and then you can know.
Yeah.
I want to re-invoke Carlos's observation earlier in saying that the narrative, which is different from the history, from the chronicle, is what compels the novel also. That you have experiences, but how they come out on the paper are completely different. If someone asks me what I used to hike in the woods with my friends, but that's the extent of the experience that went into my book. So if you ask, how do your life experiences in being queer or being a college professor or anything else go into your novel, it's going to be almost impossible to say, because it's been retooled. It's been cauterized. It's a sort of a different world, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Chelsea, I think you told me at some point that you were trying to stop, what was it you were saying about you were trying to stop writing in small towns, but you couldn't get yourself out of it. I wonder if that's sort of also I'd love to know about that, but I wonder if that's also a metaphor for are you able to write outside of yourself? Do you have trouble with that?
Well, I do now. I think because I was closeted for so long and I wrote stuff that I wasn't interested in writing. I wrote stuff that I thought I was supposed to write, which was the way that I was living my life. And so now for me, in the past 6 years since I've come out, it feels like there's this whole new world of writing to explore. And I can actually pull on my experiences now and my feelings and the things that I've been through. Whereas before I was I didn't have a base for what I was talking about, and my writing reflected that. It wasn't emotionally authentic. It wasn't resonant with people. And I think now, having become more authentic with myself, my writing is also more authentic, and I'm not going to go back from that. I think writing different jobs, different occupations, living in different places, research can do that, but there are certain human emotional things that you can't research, and that comes from a very specific experience sometimes. So I do try to kind of, set things in different time periods and different places. But the emotions and the heart of the story, it's going to be my experience, it's going to come from someplace really deep inside me. So.
I totally agree.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, well then, next question. This is sort of, we all sort of came here for similar reasons, but I think everyone has experience, obviously. What is your advice to queer authors looking to get published? A lot of people don't know where to apply. They think, oh, I'm queer. Remember actually the very first book we published, Scissors, Paper, Stone. I remember when I called Martha to tell her she had won, she was a little confused about it. And I later found out that she had been trying to get this book published for 20 years. But when she first started pitching it, people said it was too queer. And then now that it had come around to now, she said that people were saying it wasn't queer enough. Right? What what are you supposed to do there? But as queer authors who have all been published, I believe in more than one way, or with more than one press, I believe. How did you get here? What is your advice for if you could talk to your younger self? what would you have said?
My advice would be to pretend that you live in a vacuum, pay no attention to what any editor says to you, and just keep sending it out. No, because of what you just said, Toby. Oh, it's not queer enough. Oh, it's too queer. But you're going to get that. People are going to praise the thing that the last person denigrated. You cannot listen to more than one voice, and that voice needs to be yours.
Wow.
It's a slugfest.
Yeah, I was going to say along that line, you have to be your own biggest cheerleader, because a lot of us didn't have cheerleaders when we were growing up, or haven't, and so the writing community is tough to break into. And if you don't believe in yourself, if you don't keep pushing, like David was saying, you have to be your own biggest supporter and believer in yourself.
Publishing is no marker of whether you're good or not. That's what I tell my students. Like, just because there's a lot of crap out there that gets published, it doesn't mean that you're good. It's so much more important to find a home for your work that you feel good about and feel good about your work. Like David was saying, I love that idea of just ignore it and just keep sending. I also say that to my students, just keep putting your work out there, because you get published and that didn't actually mean that you were better or worse. It just means that they happen to like you in that moment.
Luck was with you this time. Right.
It's it is so much more perspiration than anything else. Like, you just have to keep submitting, and know that it's not a marker of failure or success in and of itself. It's what happens because the book is out in the world that you can say that lived or that didn't live.
Yeah, that's such a great point. I also like to tell people the amount of writers in this world are expanding exponentially all the time. The amount of publishers is not.
Right.
We tell people all the time, start a publishing company. If you need help, we will help you how, but start more publishing companies, because there's only so many places, and there's just only so many places to do it, right?
Right.
I agree, but on a certain, I think, yes, keep submitting, and yes, keep trying, but also keep revising and keep educating yourself, keep working on it. Like, if you want to have a six-pack, you got to starve yourself, and you got to go to the gym every day and do a lot of crunches. It is the same with writing. Just because you can type, that doesn't mean, this applies to every aspiring writer. Just because you can type, that doesn't mean that you can write. Keep working on it, keep educating yourself, keep reading. I would say read not only fiction, read nonfiction, watch a lot of TV, talk to people, live, observe people, travel. A good writer is an educated person. The writers are not born, they're made. And it takes years and a lot of pain and a lot of work. So yes, keep submitting. I would disagree with David. Pay attention to what people say. Don't do what they tell you to do, but just pay attention whether they like it or not. And if they normally, when people give you advice, they're wrong. Well, when they give you advice about your work, but if they didn't like it, there's a reason. So pay attention to that and go back and edit your work, and revise it 3 times before you let your husband read it. And 40 times before you send it to an agent. And after each rejection, go back to your letter, go back to your submission, think about what can I change to make it more attractive, and then plan who you're going to send it to. Like, if it's an editorial that only publishes YA and yours is for adults, well, pass on that and send it to someone else, because otherwise you're going to alienate people.
Yeah.
So keep educating yourself, keep revising, keep submitting.
Yeah, actually, that's a great point. What I say to people, even when I'm developmentally editing their manuscript, but in all cases with advice, I say, listen to the advice, sure. If you agree with, think about whether you agree with it. It's not really about whether they're right or wrong. It's whether you agree with it or not.
Right.
And if you think, yeah, that's a great point, I should definitely clean that part up, awesome. But if they're like, oh, I didn't like this part because there's a gay sex scene and it's too explicit, well, like, wrong reader, right? Move it on.
Move on. Move on.
If that's the point, that's the point, right?
Well,
I
what
just
you were
remembered
saying too? Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, Amber Flame, you were saying about rejections, all the rejections you get. And I'll never forget once walking into our kitchen in the before times where we did that at the office and we were all there. And I overheard a couple of interns talking about all their submissions. And one person said, oh, yeah, I just got my 15th submission or 15th rejection. And they were so bummed. And the other one was like, wait, 15? Like, you got to get at least 100 rejections before you expect any acceptance. And I was like, this person was, I think they had just graduated. They were just graduated high school maybe. And I just couldn't believe they already knew that. But I just keep telling people that a 20-year-old taught me that to get 100 rejections before you expect anything. That is real, right? I like to tell people,
close.
Right?
Yeah. And so you're not even close till you got a stack.
Yeah, right? They like to say Harry Potter got rejected 12 times.
Right.
There are 11 editors that are kicking themselves really hard.
Yeah.
But someone missed that. And it doesn't mean Harry Potter was a bad book the first 11 times. Okay, a lot of complicated history since it came out. Skipping that for this.
I got 98 rejections from agents.
No, really?
Yeah, I just counted them. When by the end counted, I just checked.
98. Mm-hmm.
Well,
what Carlos was saying too.
Huh?
What Carlos was saying too about educating yourself. Part of that is reading. You have to. If you're not out there reading in the world that you want to be in as a writer, then you're doing yourself a disservice, and you're really writing on ego, thinking that you created something that you may not have created. And when people say, where do I submit to? Look at your favorite authors. Where do they submit to? Where where are their homes? Do they publish a lot in that genre? That's the biggest guide is look at what you like, because more than likely what you like is resonant with how you write. And if you don't know what you like, I'm sorry, you're not Prince. You're not going to create in a bubble. You need to get out there and read some more. So Carlos, you're right. Educate yourself. That's part of the practice of writing, is consuming what's being written by other people.
Yeah.
98, Carlos. I love that you knew. I thought you were going to look for a stack or something of rejections.
Well, I'm when I get disappointed, I plan my vengeance. I'm gonna write all the people, and I'm gonna send a photo of the check I get.
Nice.
Do you remember E. Cummings' first book of poetry? It's called No Thanks, and on the first page, he lists all the publishing companies that rejected it. No thanks, and then every publishing company in the entire world. So that can be kind of revenge. Right in the frontispiece of those 98 rejections. Go to hell.
I like that sass. I like the publisher who allowed that to be printed in the book. Was like,
absolutely.
I'd like to thank all my haters.
Haters gave me the fuel to get myself where I am today.
Exactly.
That's great. Okay, let's see. One last question, if anyone wants to answer it. What is something about your experience as a writer that you wish you had known in the beginning? So if you were literally talking to your younger self, what's the heads up you would have given?
Poetry
You're more than a writer.
Sorry, David.
Poetry doesn't make money. That's a good one.
Poetry doesn't make money. What I said was you're more than a writer. That in my life, I tend to think if I'm not succeeding the way I want as a writer, then something's wrong with my life. And it took me a while to realize, no, writing is an avocation. It is, the glory of my heart, but it is not my identity. And I would have told my younger self.
That's a good
Thanks, David.
Yeah. That's cool. Yeah, and Amber Flame, to yours, I tell people poetry itself does not make money. but it can bring attention to parts of your life that do make money.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
Like if you're a teacher, if you're an like all the different ways people can be teachers.
I'm an influencer. That's what I like to say.
There you go.
All right. Any final advice for your younger selves?
I would tell to myself, well, I didn't know how to engage, and I'm actually preparing a class that I'm going to teach about that, and how to. You need to understand how to capture and retain people's attention. When I started writing, my favorite writer is Balzac, and in my first book, I imitated Balzac, of course, because I loved him, and I thought it was all a matter of having beautiful words and beautiful prose, and then having very detailed descriptions and philosophical reflections and the Turing and all that, like literature from the 19th century. But we live in different times, and my audience, I mean, I'm not Balzac to begin with. My audience is completely different, and I'm competing with video games and YouTube and films and all that. So you cannot write a book as it was written before. And even if we love literature from the past, we have to accept that we're writing for a complete different world. So you need to understand how to engage that people. So there's a lot to learn about that. And I mean, watch people on YouTube. You're an influencer, Amber. Watch how people do it in even if it's teenagers, like being silly. What are they doing to capture people's attention? What are they doing that I'm not doing? There's a lot to learn from everyone. And during this pandemic, I've been watching a lot of YouTube videos and there's a lot to learn from these young people, and precisely because they're just being silly and producing videos for their friends, and then they became professionals, and I got it somehow and learned. So if you read the classics and educate yourself, but also apply the tools for modern audiences, and you understand how to capture attention and engage it, and how the brain works, what is the psychology behind that, then you can create a more engaging story and more productive and all that. And I don't know if you noticed that I was sweating when I was reading. I'm not that crazy when I'm reading, but I realized when I started reading in public that people were acting their readings. And I said, oh my God, I gotta do that myself, and I gotta force myself. And that's not my natural voice. It is not my natural voice. But you gotta force yourself, and you gotta, being a writer is like being an actor. I mean, you're an actor, the producer, the director, you're everything there. So you gotta really jump and give it all, and who cares? And you gotta allow people to laugh at you, and they may be laughing with you or at you. It doesn't matter. You're giving your best, but you shouldn't be afraid, because it works. That's how you engage people. I mean, this is just an example, but
yeah, wow, yeah, baby Carlos has a lot to learn.
My advice is, don't focus only on classical, beautiful literature. Like, there's, you can learn from everyone and everywhere. Pay attention to everything.
Yeah, I love that. That's a good one. Pay attention to everything. That is definitely a good one. All right. Well, thank you all so much for joining me on screen today. I've never had a little Quill family panel before. This is a lot of fun. Really appreciate it. And check out, there's a thing down below. You can check out books from all these readers at redhen.org/virtual. Just plug in there. There'll be a link to check out all these books. Thank you again, and I'll see you all soon. Just going to bring Monica on. We'll sign off for next time.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Bye.
Yeah, thank you. All right. Back to me and Monica.
Hey, that was amazing.
right.
That was so much fun. I loved listening to everybody read, and more importantly, I really loved all of the advice that everybody gave. As a writer myself, I really took to heart, and I wrote it down. Carlos's advice: a good writer is an educated person, which I love, and I'm a huge advocate in people educating themselves and learning more, because you can't really write about anything unless you learn life. And then Amber Flame's publication is not a marker of being good, which is so important to kind of remember, because as I said, also as a writer myself, getting rejections and not getting anything published or anything like that is really hard, and you feel like you're not good. You feel like you're not good enough or anything like that. And hearing all the advice from all of the writers was super useful and very encouraging. Yeah, so this was a fantastic event. Good job, Tobi. And let's see. So next week, actually, we are going to have a really great conversation featuring Sebastian Matthews, the author of Beyond Repair, and Vivi Francis. And they're going to be talking about kind of current events. This book is about Sebastian's process recovering from a head-on collision and kind of returning to a world that is very different than the one that he'd been in before, and it's really relevant today, and I'm super excited for that conversation. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely excited for the next one. Remember, this one was all surrounding this brand new publication, Summer of the Cicadas by Chelsea Catherine, available now wherever books are sold or wherever books are sold online. Thank you all very much for joining us, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye-bye.